Right. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the 7th International Conference on Practice Research pre-conference webinar number 4. Today we have about 655 registrations, but we are not expecting that big number. And these 465 registered individuals are from about 31 countries and regions. At the moment, I think we have 20 over. Let's see how many else will join us. But I think the number is not the most important. The learning is most important to us. Now, what will happen today is in a few minutes, I would end this session and hand the time over to our panel for a 50-minute presentation. During their presentation, they will also be inviting questions and facilitating interactions. The panel of speakers have deliberately made more time for you to ask more questions and also facilitate more interactions. The priority will be given to those who would speak up by oning your mic. And for those who are a little shy or you prefer not to be seen or not to be heard, you can use the question box. Let me repeat, question box. Yeah. So this is a Zoom mode, a meeting mode where participants can speak up, and please mute your mic when you are not speaking, when the others, particularly our presenters, are speaking, so there would be no interruptions. Remember, place your questions into the question box only. You can use the chat box, however, to connect with one another, and we will not address any comments or questions in the chat box later. We will focus on the question box only, so it will be easier for our panel of speakers. I would also help to check if there are any questions that are put into the chat box. My colleagues will do that with me too. So the presentation will be sent to all participants after the webinar. And today's recording will also be posted on the International Community of Practice Research website so that people can watch it again, or those who missed the session today will be able to go and look at the recorded session for today. And I'm sure this can be reviewed again and again, and we'll be able to learn from our distinguished panel of speakers today. Now, without further ado, let me hand the time over to my beloved colleague, Dr. Kong Swee Ting, or Swee Ting Kong from Durham University. Swee Ting, over to you.
Thank you so much, Tim and Juliana, and also everyone joining us at different time zones as well. We're very pleased to be here and seeing all of you, although Zoom has got limitation about how many people we can see, but hopefully we can engage with you as much as possible. So we need to take a second to share my screen, and I'm also very privileged to talk to you today with my very beloved colleagues and friends involved in the Social Work Practitioner Research Network that we would actually talk a little bit about later on. So just kind of bear with me for a second while I'm sharing my screen. I hope you can see my PowerPoint.
Yes, we can.
Oh, that's perfect. We are very, very pleased to share with you the work that we've been doing together as a collective in the past 5 years plus. Jane would correct me if I'm wrong about the date. So I think today we bring together colleagues from the Social Work Practitioner Research Network that we set up during COVID-19 and carry on doing research together and empowering each other to learn from each other. And quite often when we do our work, we collaborate, from the design to the analysis and to the dissemination and delivery of impact. And hopefully today that encapsulates the essence of our experiences in today's webinar. So it's the three of us here to speak about this topic. That will be Hoi Tat from UCL and Jane Shears from the British Association of Social Workers and myself from Durham University. You will hear more about us later on as well. So before we start, we would like to invite you as well to put in the chat. I know that Tim and Juliana would kindly keep an eye on the chat function. What we would like you to come back to us with is that why you're here today. Why do you want to learn about co-analysis and using qualitative approaches for social practice research? What motivates you? What brings you here? So then later on, I will ask Tim and Juliana to bring back some of your answers. So what we hope to achieve today really is that to have an interactive workshop with you and to kind of learn also a little bit about how you approach social practice research, and hopefully we can share with you as well how we as a collective and individuals doing practice research is using qualitative methods as a way to enable and foster co-analysis, and why co-analysis is so important. Not just to talk about the rationale, but also some practical steps that we have taken to achieve co-analysis and to show some examples if you're interested in reading on as well. So a focus on co-analysis is also a focus on how we actually bring practice wisdom, data, and curiosity together in an integrated process, and not to think about co-analysis as a step to take, but as part of the larger process of experience, evidence, and exploration integration. And then also then to address the very long-standing question of bridging practice, experience, and evidence that has been always a struggle in thinking about social work as a profession, not just for practice, but also for theory, research, and evidence. It sounds very ambitious. We're not going to do all of them today, or at least we don't stop, today, but continue to have that conversation, hopefully. Before we can get to talk about all these things, we would like to kind of very, very briefly define how we understand social work practice research and practitioner research and what is it really for. We know that there has been a lot of terminology that you have heard of, social work practice research, practitioner research, and all the other variations of it. And we try to kind of give a very, very broad definition here when we talk about social practice research. We believe that research for, from, and in practice that helps improve the process, outcomes, and ethics of social work practice would be broadly considered as social work practice research that could be led by academic researchers, practitioner researchers, even service user-led research that speaks to the improvement of practice. We would consider that as like a wide range of possibilities included under this particular umbrella. And in today's workshop, we will particularly focus on practitioner research. It means that social work practice research that involves social workers in the implementation and the design of research. It could be led by social workers. It could be a collaborative research that involves social workers in different steps and to different degree. So it's also a very broad concept or an umbrella of practice here. And we believe that this also speaks to what we call the participatory turn in practice research that emphasizes collaboration, empowerment, co-production, and all of that is to achieve better quality of knowledge that makes knowledge that we produce, evidence that we produce that is relevant to practice and then modifiable for improving practice. And as a process itself is also for empowerment, not just empowerment of service users, community members, or social workers, but also the empowerment of academic researchers to make us ourselves more practice near. So hopefully that sets the scene for why we are here. So we would like to hear. I know this slide doesn't actually show much. What we would like to do here on this slide is that to bring in your answers, why you are here, and then we will talk a little bit about why we are here as well. If you have not yet, please do it now, is to put in the chat why you're here, what brings you here today, what what would be your motivations? And if Tim and Juliana can bring back some of the answers, then that would be brilliant. Here, from Tim and Juliana yet, but I'm sure, yeah, Tim,
There
please.
isn't any, there isn't, there are two, okay, there are two
That's
answers that just
perfect.
came in. Dr. Indrani said, I'm interested in supporting and sustaining social work well-being. I use arts-based research to make it an ethical, empowering process in research and to have an impact beyond beyond academia. I am interested in in learning how to integrate social work practice and research in a more aligned way.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tim. I think it
Yes.
shows that we are actually aligned in our value and purposes. Are there any comments that you would like to bring in before we move on?
Yeah. So there is also a Mentimeter in the chat box. You can also put into the Mentimeter what brings you here and submit it. So Hoytech will be looking at it, I suppose.
Thank you
Yes,
so
I
much.
just opened the Menti and found some people they drop their thoughts. So to learn the experience, explorations of methods, to hear experience, kind of co-create curiosities. I found that every people joining this webinar is really interested in qualitative research in kind of including practitioners.
Yeah, and
That's
Mary Joy said
amazing.
similar things like meet my international colleagues and share like positions.
Oh, that's amazing. I think that speaks exactly to the ethos of doing international webinar, isn't it? Is to make connections with like minds elsewhere. We might not be able to can meet, if it is like restricted in our geographical location. That's amazing. Thank you, colleagues. And
Yeah,
I'm sure Hoytech can also screen cap the word cloud that is now created on Mentimeter alongside the slides later on. So I think, with that scene set right now, we are also in a position to tell you a little bit more about our own journeys and to tell you, as a practitioner, as an academic, as a PhD student like Hoytet in UCL, but also all the different sort of backgrounds that we bring into this journey and what motivates us as well. So hopefully that also kind of speaks to your experience and what brings you here. Hoytet, do you want to come in?
Sure. Thanks, Shui Ting, for introducing us and inviting me to join this webinar to kind of share my practice and research experience. My name's Ted. I'm a social worker and PhD student at UCL Division of Psychiatry. My professional engagement draws on dementia care narrative practice, and expressive arts therapy, so particularly in social work with older people and their carers. These approaches help me to express their stories, losses, and hopes in creative way that can be more accessible than purely verbal work. When I was studying social work, I was involved in a cyber youth pilot project that respond to suicidal crises among young people using online interventions. That early experience showed me the importance of understanding from practitioners what actually works or does not work when developing innovative service model in social work. It also highlights the potential of digital and mobile tools for engagement. So move to my master's and PhD studies, I've used qualitative method extensively in gerontological social work research. My works focus on the lived experience of people with dementia and their carers during missing episodes, and then older people who have been affected by financial fraud and scams. These are often hidden experience, but they have profound impact on safety, trust, and quality of life. So for me, through interviews, focus groups, narrative or meta synthesis, qualitative methods allow me to capture how people make sense on these events over time. Personally, I'm particularly interested in transformative content analysis, which involve bringing in diverse voices, especially practitioners and stakeholders directly connected to the research topic, to work with the data together. I still remember that joining the buzzword with social work research group with Shui Ting and Jane together to kind of dealing with this data to do the co-analysis together is kind of really fulfilling. I believe practice rhythm is essential for interpreting existing data that leads to grounded, realistic recommendations for practice. My co-analysts become a bridge between academic evidence and everyday decision making in social care. So personally, my personal motivations and curiosity were sparked during my master's degree, where I learned that it can make, on average, around 70 years for research finding to be translated to routine clinical practice. So that figure made me ask a simple question. How can we shorten this time and create spaces where practitioners and researchers work together to respond to a real question from practice? In the context of rapidly changing social needs, such as a rising number of people living with dementia and increasing awareness of neglect and financial fraud, we need to harness practice wisdom and research evidence and respond more quickly and collaboratively. So this is my introduction. So I will pass the time to Jane.
Thank you, Tat. That was really interesting to hear about your journey into practitioner research. So thank you very much. My journey I'm going to do in 3 sections. One is when I was a child, then when I was an adolescent, and then when I became an adult. So I am a mental health social worker, and nearly all my career has been working in mental health. But I believe my interest in mental health came from being a child, growing up very close to a large Victorian psychiatric hospital. In the UK, most psychiatric hospitals were built quite a long way away from a town centre or a city. But as the housing developments came along, housing became much closer towards where the psychiatric hospitals were. And so I grew up very close to a psychiatric hospital. And the boundaries between the hospital and the community were, in one sense, artificial, because people who were in the psychiatric hospital used all the community facilities. And I remember also when I was 10 years old, our primary school created a show called Songs Around the World. And we took our show into the psychiatric hospital and also the hospital for people with learning disabilities. And we performed our show for the patients. Then when I was an adolescent, I was 17 years old, we were encouraged to do a work placement. So I chose to do my work placement in the psychiatric hospital. And my experience was that psychiatric hospitals were quite awful places, that the environment, the nursing staff, the treatments were something that I found very difficult to accept or agree with. And whilst I am not sure that's what led me to working as a social worker, I do think it had a big impact on my personal values around rights, citizenship, social justice, and inclusion. And inclusion is a good word, because then when I practiced as a social worker, I began to think much more about how to include people in the work that we were doing, and then ultimately including all of us in our road to practitioner research. So when I became a social worker, between about 1996 and 2002, I carried out various pieces of research. But it wasn't really until I started my doctorate, which was a practitioner research focused study with experts by experience of mental health services, that I really found my journey into participatory practitioner research. And my doctorate was focused on how do people who use mental health services experience the integration of social care with mental health services in community delivered mental health services. So this became a study that was conceived with and carried out in a completely co-produced way, and it was underpinned by participant action research. At the same time, which is my photo here, yes, that is me. I've got slightly different hair at the moment. But at the same time, I was also involved in evaluating a co-produced project, which was about setting up social work as a postgraduate profession in Ukraine. And my lovely colleague here is Oksana Boyko, who was one of the first graduates of the first masters in social work in Ukraine. And Edmundas, you may not realize this, but this is actually taken in Lithuania at the European Social Work Research Conference last year in Lithuania. And this is me and Oksana Boyko, 25 years on from the first time we met. And Oksana is now the program lead for the social work training course at Kiev Mohyla Academy. So it was absolutely lovely to meet with her again. So that really is my journey into practitioner research and the qualitative methods that I have used, which we'll be talking about a bit later, and my personal motivation and curiosity that goes back quite a long way. So it's lovely to be here with you today, and I'm really looking forward to taking you through the rest of our presentation. Over to you, Shui Ting.
Thank you so much, Jane and Hoyt. As I said, I always feel very privileged to work with wonderful colleagues here. I think the way I talk about or organize my experience or my journey going into social work practice research and practitioner research is on two major failures that I experienced. I think people like to talk about, what they have achieved, but I think we also learn very much from what we failed to do. And I think what happened was that I was actually qualified as a social worker in Hong Kong in early 2000s. And with the hope and dreams, thinking that, if I'm equipped with all the skills that I need to kind of support people, then, the world would be in a better place. And particularly as a woman in a Chinese society, I have seen so much gender inequality embedded in the everyday life, in family life, and an amount of inequalities and even violence and abuse that you witness as a young person was enough to drive me to think about, could we have done this differently? Could we actually support women differently? While I had the dream to be equipped with all those skills to become a social worker and believing that I could make some difference, I think the moment when I graduated, I realized as well, only with the skills and also with so much more knowledge about the wider theoretical context and policy context, and also the sort of power and cultural structures that led women into those positions would not be enough, for me to feel confident, to practice. Instead of going full on into practice, at that moment, I thought, what should I do then? I then actually move on to do my master's in social work, MPhil, actually, to start thinking about, could I actually create knowledge and learn more about what theories are there, what research is there to help me understand the issue. And then I embark on a journey of participatory action research with women survivors. That was my first participatory research carried out in Hong Kong with women survivors. And that itself was a massive transformative experience for me, because the idea of bringing social work practice and skills into the everyday life of women survivors who experience domestic violence and taking care of their children allows me to think about the limitation of existing theories and the way they were labeled and identified by the policy. Working with them allows me to also understand the depth of experience embedded in the everyday language that they use to describe their life, and also the importance of children in the post-separation context of domestic violence. At the end, because of that experience of collaboration, we co-created new theories and approach to support women and children after they separated from the abusive father and abusive partner of women. And those experiences also enable me to think about another thing which I never thought about. I built new theories actually in that process. But then the theories themselves are not enough, to inform practice. But we actually need to coordinate each other and make practice, better by actually working with social workers. That set me on a new pathway to collaborate not just with service users, but social workers in creating new practice model that can actually benefit those who are at the service receiving end. And that basically set the tone for the rest of my academic journey. I co-created new end-of-life care models in Hong Kong with social workers and carers of those who are dying or living their life at the very last 6 months of their life. And also we then set up the social work practitioner research network in the UK with Baswa, and Jane particularly, she was like the co-founder of the network, and carry on doing participatory and co-produced research. So the methodological foundations for using qualitative method and then dialogical method for analysis, what is it all about? Ted, do you want to come in here?
Yes, thanks, Shui Ting. So today's our topic is about qualitative methods. So first of all, we need to define why qualitative methods we're adopting in our research. So first of all, qualitative methods are critical for achieving in-depth understanding, especially in complex practice settings. Compared with quantitative method, which focus on numerical patterns and measure outcomes, qualitative approaches allows exploration of value, preference, relationships, and social interaction in the real context where care happens. This is vital when studying sensitive topics such as going missing, neglect, financial abuse, or domestic abuse mentioned by Shui Ting, where meaning, emotion, and relationships strongly shape behavior and risk, which is really important for us as a social worker in kind of assessing and designing the service model to kind of responding emerging needs. These methods also encourage inclusive participations by practitioners and people with lived experience. Practitioners bring frontline knowledge that is feasible in services, while for me, people with dementia, carers, and older adults affected by neglect or fraud contribute insights that may not be visible in routine data. I still remember that interviewing people with dementia and carers for their sharing their lived experience, which a really kind of unique perspective and grounded perspective because the situations that happens in their real life. By bringing this perspective into data collection and analysis, qualitative studies become more relevant and engaging to people we aim to serve. And qualitative research helps bridges practice and research. As I mentioned during my introduction, it takes time to kind of transform what we found in research to practice. And qualitative research really helps to synthesize lived experience that, and as well as kind of connect the practice with wisdom to theoretical development. So this strengthens the practical aspects of research findings and support the development of interventions and policy. that were both evidence-informed and grounded in real-world context. So we found qualitative research is kind of really important, especially in social work and human services. So we'll go on to talk about the dialogical analysis. So I'll pass the time to
That's to me.
to Chai Ting, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh.
So dialogical analysis, it emphasizes the collaboration, triangulation, and the recognition of positional knowledge. One of the things that we won't have time to talk about today, but I think is a really important element of practitioner research, is the issue about the positionality of the researcher. And what the dialogical analysis enables us to do is to bring together everyone's position, either as collaborator, researcher, co-production, expert by experience, together in that collaboration of the analysis, and share those voices talking together around the particular area of interest or study. And by doing that, it seeks to address power differentials. It shares power and breaks down hierarchical structures that perhaps have been more apparent in more traditional approaches to research and researching issues and things generally. It's about the co-creation of knowledge, and it's not about just acknowledging one's own power and respect, but about respecting the experiences and views of others. And it enables professional curiosity to really help us go further in the analysis. It helps us to create a much deeper analysis of the issues because we're experiencing it from different perspectives and bringing those perspectives together. And by doing that, we create a sort of synergy of interest in the topic, but also the issues around people's different perspectives about that gives a much deeper and richer understanding to the analysis. So I think in looking at what dialogical analysis is not, on to the next slide, I think what we would be saying is that it definitely is not tokenistic involvement. Now, sometimes nearly all the work is done and then a group of people are brought in afterwards to comment on it. And what we would say is that that is tokenistic involvement. I've put in the ladder of participation here as a reference for you, but also do look at the new Economics Foundation publication that's also there, which talks about the ladder of participation recreated in terms of co-production. And I think you'll find that a really useful document to enable you to see that the ladder of co-production is telling us that actually the best way to co-produce participant research or practitioner participant research is when there is an equal relationship between people who use services and the people responsible for the services, and working together, even from designing research, designing services, working together and making strategic decisions about the best way to carry out the research or deliver services. So I really encourage you to look at that publication. I think, Tat, you're going to move on with the shared decision making.
I think I would prefer the rest of the 2 points. Thank you, Jane. It's so lovely. I think when we decided to kind of have this slide on what is not, I think what we try to do is to kind of tell or talk about involving people or practitioners or service users in the research doesn't necessarily to co-produce research or co-analysis. co-analysis requires not just to avoid tokenistic involvement, but also it is really about shared decision making. What do we need? What kind of knowledge do we need, to improve practice and the well-being of people, and also to kind of tackle how our position or vested interests in our position would actually avoid or make certain knowledge invisible, less valid, or even to dismiss them completely, or more importantly, is to create spaces, empowerment opportunities, and capacity building for those who are generally marginalized in the knowledge production process, quite often dominated by university or academic researchers, to be part of this process and allow their experiences to be as valid as theoretical and scientific knowledge that is produced, in the sort of rather academically created or curated processes. So all these things are very important. And also, we also argue that to be genuinely dialogical, co-produced, and participatory in all steps of research, including the analysis of data, we need to actually tackle ethical issues by facing its complexity. We will argue that all the genuine co-production would not allow us to just stick with rules and ethical principles and rules only, but to address ethical dilemma in practice and in interactions with people. And that's why we try to kind of add this particular slide in together, just to say that what it is not. Okay, we pause here a little bit and just to see whether there are any questions from the floor before we move on to some examples. Should be the question slide here. I don't know whether Tim or Juliana would be able to bring in some questions if there are any at this point.
I think there are two questions in the Q&A box.
That's right. Okay.
I'm a practitioner working in a correctional setting, currently interested in using qualitative research method in collecting life experience of young offender as they go through family-related programs. So I'm not sure whether this is a question or if she's just mentioning her interest. The other question is, what is a good approach to make sure that co-creators are properly recognized and acknowledged as contributors, not just research practice? It can be sometimes difficult to get sufficient funding to reimburse co-creators for their insightful contribution. For example, research funds for research conducted in school sometimes excluded reimbursement for students or staff involved in the co-creation research process.
They are brilliant questions. Thank you for whoever is the anonymous participant there. Jean and Hoyte, do you want to come in to answer that question first, and then I come after? I come in after.
Yeah, I think that is a really good point about the involvement of people in research and the and how we truly acknowledge their contributions. I think one of the things that we have done in the past is to have an experts by experience remuneration policy, which means that there are some rules around being able to support people and pay them for their contributions and their involvement, which are truly validating what they can or what we can all bring to the research process, but also how we can reimburse people for their contributions. I think it's important to make sure that we are responsible in how we do that, in the sense that if people perhaps are, for example, having social security or are being paid for because they have a disability, for example, and receive money from the state, that we are clear that we don't do anything that contravenes or in any way may put them at risk of losing their entitlement. So it is a very fine line, and it all depends really on the social structures in your own countries. But you will find a way to do it, and sometimes one of the solutions perhaps is to give people vouchers, or rather than actual cash money. But yes, you will find a way around it, and it is really important to try and do that.
Um, from my point of view, I think I'm kind of privileged to start learning the concept called PPI, patient and public involvement, as well as engagement. During my master degree at UCL, because I'm studying mental health research, and mental health is kind of a really dominant by medical point of view, and doctors, psychiatrists, or other allied professionals like clinical psychologists. But in some research, like some dealing with some withdrawal symptoms and kind of how we improve the care pathway, participants' involvement is kind of important. Not only the research participants, but join together to kind of involving in data analysis, even the research design. So I'm kind of privileged to receive some funding from the NIHR, the National Institute for Health and Care Research. They're really generous to provide funding for researchers to kind of involving lived experience to receive research training, and then get involved in research design and data analysis. So I think we still need to kind of put effort to promote this part in not only the UK but the worldwide research environment, so that especially for these complex issues involving not only the care providers but the care recipients, to kind of involving to improve the rapidly changed environment.
Thank you so much. I think, my colleagues probably have answered quite a lot of the different parts of the questions. I try to kind of talk a little bit about the practical tips that we have about acknowledging and recognizing our peer researchers, or be it service users researchers or practitioner researchers properly, rather than just as a contributor and co-researchers, rather than just someone being involved in the research project. I think in the past records that we have as a collective, we always have got all the names who are willing to be named as co-researchers in the research team. So we acknowledge them in all the documents, from the research proposal to the all the outputs that we produce. And you will see every single person's name, no matter what experience and positions they draw on and bring in, they will be properly formally acknowledged in outputs. And not just that, we bring everybody into opportunities that come out from the publications and projects that we co-produce. And quite often, in order to make the output with, to create the possibility for greater impact coming out from the co-produced outputs, we often try to kind of make reports Creative Commons, which is a license that allows people to kind of see the work that we co-produce, aiming for bigger, wider circulation of the work that we have done together. And as well, if there are anything derived from the outputs, we always go back to our collective, be it service user researchers, practitioner researchers, and academic researchers together to agree that, we can actually allow this particular output to be derived, from the work that we do together. All these are little practical steps, but it makes a great difference, because they can then use, how they are acknowledged in the output for their ongoing research participation in other projects, and also to have that kind of sustainability in their profile to be in those co-produced research spaces as well. I think they are just more like practical steps for this to be acknowledged. I think I see like other questions coming in as well. I need the help from, yes, please.
Okay, so to add on to Ms. Angelina Tay's statement, she also asked, how do we address the sensitivity of positional in working with the correctional population, particularly being respectful of being inclusive and of equal power between researcher and offender participants?
That is a very, very good question.
Swee Teng, can I also add on Rofas, who's from Indonesia, a similar question? I would like the presenter to share how they involve participants from the marginalized, non-academic community in the whole process of research. To be specific, how do you go about developing research questions, data collection and analysis? And then another point by Rufa is how participatory is meaningful and not only tokenistic. So, for example, other than the correctional community, what about a disability community where criticism of various aspects is prevalent?
Yeah, big questions. Jane and Hoyte, you go first. I know you've got a lot to say about this. Please do come on.
I'm happy to go first. In the research that I mentioned back when I was talking about doing practitioner research and collaborating with experts by experience of mental health services, we had exactly these kinds of questions. People hadn't been involved in research before, and inevitably then there is a power differential between people who have got experience of research and people who have experience of mental health distress. And we were interested in experts by experience being researchers in that they interviewed other people with experts by experience. So what we did was to put some training on for the co-researchers into how to interview and how to invite people to share their experiences. And also we used, some of you might be familiar with a textual data analysis program called NVivo. And we trained people how to use NVivo to co-analyze the qualitative data. Now, I would be in a position to deliver that training, but that then would reinforce the power that I know more than you know. If you look at sort of concepts around power, and so what we did was to commission a service user trainer, so somebody with an expert by experience, who is also a trainer, to deliver the training to our co-researchers who are experts by experience. And that's links back to what I was saying earlier about the concept of positionality, because if you consider who is an insider, who is an outsider, you can look up and read yourselves around those sorts of concepts. What you really need to get to is that we are all insiders, that we bring something different to the research process. So I would just encourage you to think about the kinds of things that almost unintentionally suggest that the power is maintained, that you need to kind of pull back from that and create a space where everyone's contribution is valued and make that contribution as equal as it possibly can be in terms of that contribution to the research process. And Shui Ting is absolutely right. You know, in one of the projects I was involved with, we had some people who felt confident in, you know, putting questionnaires into envelopes. We've had some people, as I've mentioned before, that felt confident in using in vivo to co-analyze samples of the qualitative data. So everyone has a contribution, but it's just about finding out what people feel comfortable with, and what people feel they need to be able to have that equitable contribution to the research process.
Yes, I share the same feeling with Jane, how we could kind of foster an environment to kind of let research participants as well as their kind of peer researchers to join the research together. So I found I received a questions from a person, the direct message to me asking about existing funding in Singapore to kind of apply this funding for this participatory research. And I think I will kind of search right after this webinar because for myself, I found out this UK, England is really kind of a good place to kind of starting this because I found in mental health research at UCL, there is a kind of interest group. They regularly have meetings together to recruit new members to join to involve in not only the research design but even before the grants applications. So they will really get involved not only in participating, analyzing data, but drafting the grant proposal, or even after the research, they support the dissemination. And so it really kinds of fostering a co-produced environment. And so for myself, I think my experience to work with people with dementia and the carers, recruiting them to join the group together to participate from start is really challenging. But because it takes time to kind of coordinate their participation, but I think it's really important for us to not only follow those guidelines to follow the research design, but we also involve them together to find out from their perspective which knowledge is really important for supporting our development of the intervention in future. So I think first of all, the research environment. As a researcher, we are also need to kind of address this importance to funders, to people, to government or governor of the funding, so that we can really bring people together.
So much. I think it's very comprehensive already. I think I add two things, and then we will move on to examples of actually doing it. I think I would address this issue on two levels. One is about how do we actually go into the community of the marginalized or excluded. I think quite often when we think about doing research together, we want to bring people into the academic space to have a chat. But my experience has been always been going to where they live and where they experience their everyday life. My first participatory research brought me to in the middle of the mountain where they hike every week. I sat there for weeks and weeks actually talking with them. What was the experience, after separating from the perpetrator of abuse, and why they were there in the mountain doing all those health-related exercises. When I was doing my end-of-life care research, I went to care homes and sat with people who have been working, just like day and night, to protect older adults. And how do they work? And I mean, what exactly is the issues that has been very important for them? What do we need to solve in order to make life better for everybody, practitioners and all the people living in residential care homes? When we started the COVID research, we set together as well, it was actually Boswell who collected the data and had a concern to begin with, and we entered that space. And I think it's really about breaking that barrier rather than bringing people into academia. I think academics need to actually go out a lot more to be in those spaces when it is respectful and ethical. And I think there's an ideal world of participatory research, but the ideal might not be ethical in different circumstances, be it because of the institutional barrier that already kind of structure power differences. For example, incarceration, context of incarceration is one of those that raised here, and how we actually acknowledge the limitations and work with it, and to open spaces that are not yet there, but as open, as dialogical and participatory as possible, and not to kind of create an expectation that is out of reach as well, to have that kind of check-in all the time. So that is the one level that I would sort of, talk about to address this question. The other one is to educate and advocate, educate the funders. That is very important. I think there has been a lot of work done in the UK's context to allow funders to understand the importance and the power of co-produced research. And co-produced research is not and cannot be done cheap. It is a lot of work on relational work and ethical work that we need to do before we come to the point that we can agree on a practice research proposal that speaks to the interest of diverse communities. So I think I stop here, if that's okay, and then we move on. I know that there would be a bit more, space for questions later on. We are not going to cover like many examples, but there is a core one that we would like to take you through about how we implemented co-analysis. Hoytek, do you want to kind of come in here, and then we'll be Jane taking us
Sure.
through
Um,
Just a time
so
check for our speakers. We have another 25 minutes.
Let's keep it 10
so
minutes.
yeah. Okay. So we talk about qualitative study, but we're going to dive in co-analysis. Traditional qualitative analysis often relies on sole researchers to code and interpret data independently. While this can be vigorous, but it also limited because one researcher's background, assumptions, and experience shapes which issue will kind of maybe overlook some important part. So when we are drafting qualitative studies, one of the quality we concern the qualitative study, which whether the academic really could reflect their background. So when we kind of researching complex practice environments, such as for my expertise in dementia care or adult social care, researchers may not share the day-to-day realities of frontline practitioners. So co-analysis really offer an alternative that promote collaboration inclusivity for people to kind of improve the power balances. So in this work, it means inviting social work practitioners and other stakeholders with relevant experience to join the analysis process. For example, by working together with transcripts, codes of themes, and reflecting on how their practice knowledge connects with the data. So this approach brings multiple viewpoints into the room, those of researchers, practitioners, and sometimes people with lived experience, which help to deepen interpretation and to identify tensions, blind spots, and opportunities that might otherwise be missed. By involving practitioners directly in interpreting findings, co-analysis strengthens the link between research and practice. Practitioners can immediately see how themes relate to real life issues. For social workers, might be risk assessments, any supervisions between supervisor and supervisee, which suggest some feasible recommendation examples of implementations that we are going to present later on. Co-analysis also values practitioners' self-reflections. So social work profession, we consider values, beliefs, and feelings or emotions on how we influence the reading the data. So just as in a clinical decision making, and it turns into reflection on how to share learning resources. rather than in the visual hidden process of researchers sitting in a room to kind of dealing with data, but joining people together to share their point of view. Not, I mean, they have different perspectives, they have different background by joining people together. So I will pass to Shui Ting to let us know the research network we are working on these projects.
To be very brief, we started this network in 2020, 5 years coming along, and then we have co-produced multiple projects which are listed here. And now Jane is going to tell us, the more detailed processes of the third project, at least the third project that we co-produced together, which is the coaching services in the UK. Please, Jane.
Thank you, Shui Ting. So this is a project that, well, it's a service actually that the British Association of Social Workers started in 2020. And originally it was to help support social workers who weren't recognised as key workers in the midst of the pandemic. And the service graduated and has gradually developed into a much bigger kind of project or a much bigger sort of service. And it's called the Social Work Professional Support Service, which is about offering social workers coaching sessions by other social workers who are trained as coaches. So if we can move on, please. We're at the process of really looking at the outcomes of the research, but the professional support service and the concept around coaching very much mirrors the social work values around relational, reflective, and being strengths-based. The service is UK-wide, so across the 4 nations in the UK, and it is offered to social work students, social workers, registered social workers who may be in other roles, for example, working in prisons. We had a question about correctional facilities earlier, or maybe working in the non-governmental organisations. And the study looked at the uptake of coaching and the motivations for social workers or social work students for referring themselves. It's a completely self-referral service and registering themselves for coaching. And what the study looked at was the coachee's expectations of entering into a coaching relationship and how far their expectations were met or indeed not met, because understanding why a service perhaps doesn't deliver what the expectations are is also very important. And we also looked at the experiences of the coaches as well as coachees and the focus on the personal professional development and the benefits and challenges that people were coming to the coaching relationship having experienced in the workplace. So these are all the people who were involved. So on the BASWA side, you can see that there was a national coordinator from each of the 4 nations, an administrator. We have a coach supervisor, Kate Cuthbertson, and myself as the lead. So all but one of the people on the right-hand side of your screen here are registered social workers. On the left-hand side, you'll see a familiar face, Shui Ting, as the co-investigator, and our colleague Catherine Noon, Lynn Cairns, Susan Sicano. And the project was funded by the British Association of Social Workers, but we also received funding from the government in Northern Ireland to support the evaluation of the coaching project altogether. So we carried out a survey and we had 43 responses from coaches and coachees, and we followed that up with focus groups. So we had 2 groups that were made up from the coaches and 4 focus groups that were made from the coachees. It's a bit complicated with the coach and the coachees, but there isn't really another way to explain it or describe it. So it's a bit of a funny word, but the coachees are the people who have entered into and registered for coaching, and the coaches are the social workers who have received coach training to be social workers who can also deliver coaching sessions for people registering for the service. So this whole process was conceived and designed right from the beginning between social workers, the university investigators, and social workers, both from BASWA and also the service. So it was completely collaborative. And if you go back to what I mentioned about the ladder of participation and ladder of co-production, you'll see that this was very much at the top of the ladder in terms of being a completely integrated collaborative process. And what I've put this photo here, so you can see that there's the 3 children here are all like discussing a particular object and somebody who's having a rest. That's totally fine in practitioner research, and it's okay for people to have a step out, or sometimes you just need to sleep on things and see what comes up the next morning when you wake up. So it's a thematic analysis. We went to the Social Work Practitioner Research Network. We talked with them about some of the qualitative analysis, and there's, as practicing social workers, being able to reflect on and analyse some of the issues that are coming from the qualitative data adds a really, really valuable step to the process. And we have got some quotes, and I'll perhaps put a couple in the chat because we haven't got an awful lot of time. But actually making sense to contextualize what people are saying in relation to what it's like actually working as a social worker in a very stressed and challenging working environment. BASWA also has done some research into the working conditions of social work in the UK, and the working conditions are extraordinarily challenging for practitioners currently. And I think it's really important that we've put here that you need to consider ethical considerations at all stages of the research. From as Shui Ting says, maybe some people want to be involved, but they don't want their names published in the research that comes out, particularly if it's going to be quite critical of the services that people are working in. And we just need to be very, very mindful of the risks that we may put ourselves at being very critical of the statutory services that we are perhaps working in. So just to be mindful of that. I'm happy to answer any questions about the process of the co-analysis that we carried out with this particular project, and put some highlights of the findings in the chat. But we wanted to move on specifically to talk about thematic analysis, which I think is back to you, Shui Ting.
Thank you. I think probably quite a lot of you are familiar with it, so I try to be brief and illustrate with a little exercise. I intend not to kind of overcomplicate. Basically, we sit together as groups, use thematic analysis as a way to foster dialogue, to bring experiences into the conversation, to analyze what the data might mean When we say that, it means that, say, for example, if we cluster the data like this, you can see this circle and sort of, kite shape there. So what is the similarity? How are we going to categorize them? How can we actually bring our experience and practice wisdom to make sense of it? And then in this case, if you draw, the similarity out from these two shapes, you might say that the color is the same. It's very similar, but how about this one? You might say that, oh, all of the shapes has got a corner, and that is the similarity. And thematic analysis, actually, the logic is as simple as that. Looking at data, clustering them, drawing out similarity, creating understanding, and that can be done and better done in dialogue. And that's the reason why we believe that collaborative or dialogical thematic analysis is to use thematic analysis for dialogues, and use dialogues for thematic analysis, and also use thematic analysis for dialogues across group. So what we have been doing is that we can bring cluster data into the social practitioner research network, put them in breakout groups to focus on a subset of data, using dialogue and the experiences as an instrument to make sense of the data, draw out themes and similarity. And then they come back together to use the thematic analysis that they have put together for dialogues, further deepening of understanding across groups. And you can see here is just to showcase how breakout groups are created, and that created space for capacity building. If Hoyt, you don't mind, I just can move on from here. And that also allows us to actually not just to use experiences as data, but also use experiences of social workers as well as our expert by experience as an instrument for understanding, that allows us not just to theorize from practice, but also to create understanding for improving practice and create a process of synergetic integration of experience, evidence, and scientific exploration. And if you're interested in that, there would be all the literature papers included. And this is just another example. We're not going to go into details, but just to tell you, it is a big whole world of qualitative analysis for co-produced research. If you're interested how reflection and different forms of knowledge, be it arts, poems, experience, theories, or practical knowledge, can be integrated in a reflective process for knowledge production, you can also consult this particular methodology. Use very different understanding about the problem of survivor-victim dichotomy that I refer to, and elevate children's voices in mutual care in post-separation context of domestic violence. So we finish here and just kind of pass this back. I stop sharing and then pass this back to Tim and Juliana, maybe.
Thank you, Sweet Ting. There are some more questions. Do you want them, or before we move on, I have the privilege of learning from the British Association of Social Work the term expert by experience. And I think we have not really defined that. It may be familiar with the UK colleagues, but I think beyond the UK, and maybe some European colleagues too, would you like to explain a little about what is expert by experience, which you have consistently been using?
Think you want to come in?
I'll pick this one up. Yes. So we've used a range of different terms, perhaps over the years. So clients, patients, service users, and what we currently use, which is supported by different patient groups or people who use services, is the term experts by experience. And what that really means is we are all experts in our own experiences. That from a mental health point of view, for example, we would say that people who have experienced mental health distress or experience clinical or personal recovery are experts in their own experience. And that will be different, obviously, for every individual. and it really reflects the concept around person-centered experience, person-centered approaches to working with people. So it really is intended to be a term that is respectful of people's lived experience. That may be a lived experience of disability, could be physical disability, learning disability, people who are experiencing other conditions, for example, early onset dementia. But what it actually aims to do is to respect someone's experience, and they're bringing that experience into the research process.
Thank you.
Yes, that's really important. So add one more point. Um, because we know that the name is kind of a socially constructed that we mentioned in social work many times. So we need to be careful how we name them and how we treat them. They are not only named by the as a service user or patients, but we are all together to involve in research to explore any questions we need to answer. Especially in my experience, to involve people with dementia and carers to formulate how we improve the service equitable for them to access. That's really important while doing service development, because we can imagine if they are excluded by the services due to different reasons. For example, the design of the services, whether they could access any subsidies or funding existing. So this is kind of really important for us to kind of name them by experience to address to kind of to consider their point of view and their circumstances.
Thank you. May I also raise a question that is in the question box by Rofa from Indonesia? Do you find NVivo or other applications, which I believe it's computer-assisted qualitative analysis packages, helpful, or manual coding is more accessible for expert by experience or for participants?
Yeah, I can take this one, or at least to begin. It depends, really. I think I think at least there are two factors that would affect the accessibility of NVivo. One is payment, because NVivo is expensive. It requires the license. You can download it, for 30 days trial, but you time it right. Obviously, that it allows people to get access to it. But itself is a very technical package, but then what I think is that there is a fine balance here. I think using NVivo requires training, and it is only useful, and it can offset all the time offset the input into training, time, effort, everything, only when the data set is really big. If the data set is really, really big, sort of like coding by hand is almost impossible. And it makes it even harder for people to get access to ideas or to check understanding. So I would say if the data set is really, really big, I think using NVivo could be very useful. But does it mean that they have to kind of use NVivo, or can it be someone who is more familiarized with NVivo to support the analysis process? That deserves a conversation. But if the data set is actually not that big, I think sometimes hand coding or even workshops sitting together, using highlighters and then memos, post-it notes to conceptualize or to make sense of the data could be actually more engaging and useful. So I think it really depends on the sort of accessibility in terms of license payment, input into training, as well as the size of the data set.
That's all for questions that I can find in the chat, as well as the question box. Maybe we can invite our audience to on their mics. I'm also checking on who's who here, and I realize that there are several colleagues of ours, including our chair for the International Community of Practice Research, Lars, is here. and my colleague from the government, Ms. Cheme Long, who is our welfare director of welfare, it's here as well. So I would welcome anyone to speak. At this point, whilst we're waiting for others tweeting, there are also questions about references, textbooks, guides for the topic that you are covering today. Jane has mentioned some references. Are there other additional references or guides that you would like to recommend for us to read up more after today?
I think we can add that to the reference list, and then we can send the PowerPoint alongside the reference list. I think there are a couple of really good step-by-step textbooks on practitioner research produced in the UK context. And I think there has been also guides, generally published in the UK context about community participation and community engagement, although they don't seem to speak directly to practitioner research, but actually the steps that they are recommending are very relevant in terms of how to support the participatory turn in research. Those are very useful guides. I can compile a little list maybe, and then put it also in the slide and pass it on to colleagues and friends from different parts of the world.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. If there are no more questions, then we can put a pause to the presentation. Maybe just giving a bit more space. Is there any questions? Please use the mic and speak up. Meanwhile, I'll prepare the announcements for today. Any other questions? I do not want to take away the opportunity for anyone who have one last question. Okay. If not, then allow me to make some announcements. After this webinar, we basically have 2 more webinars to come before the International Conference on Practice Research happening in Singapore. As you already know, these series of webinars is really to promote understanding and competency of practice research step by step. And I'm really grateful to Swee Ting, Jane, and Hoytek for helping us to understand how we can do dialogical analysis in a somewhat step-by-step manner, as well as giving us examples too. So the next one will be on the 2nd of February, and it is about GAI and qualitative data analysis, somewhat connected to today's qualitative analysis, but with a focus on GAI. And also interestingly, on the 6th of April at 2 p.m. Singapore time, there will be another workshop or webinar with a focus on service users. So some of the questions and some of the comments and the discussion, I think, can be continued on the 6th of April. And Professor Setzel happens to be here today, and I think that would be a good connection for her to have a sense of what are some of the questions asked today. And I would invite her to think further how she can take those questions and discussion on when we meet again on the 6th of April. Now, let me just focus a little more and sell a little more on the Gen AI meets qualitative research from experimentation to critical reflexivity. And this webinar will explore how generative AI, Gen AI, is shaping qualitative data analyses from automating thematic coding to generating narrative vignettes, touching on the practical, ethical, and methodological considerations for researchers. So do come join us. And this will be conducted by Dr. Laura Ann Sharp from the University of Auckland, New Zealand,
who specializes in creative research methodologies and innovative approaches to data collection and data analysis, with an emphasis on participant representation. So I'm really happy that the coming two webinars are very connected to today discussion. And Laura is actively involved in several practice-based research initiatives, and she has research expertise and access to an uptake of health and community services, and has been exploring Gen AI for qualitative research since ChatGPT hit mainstream. Now, the event in 2026 for us, and for me at least, would be 7th, 8th, and 9th of July, and that would be the 7th International Conference on Practice Research. This is going to be a very important event for the field of social work in Singapore and our university. Please note that the call of abstracts will close by the end of this month, 31st of December 2025. Registration is already open and it will close on the 31st of May. If you have any inquiries, please contact Juliana, who is present here today, at icpr@counsel, counsel.org.singapore. This is again going to be sent to you in our deck of slides. So do visit our website. It's a very, very, very rich and full program. We have 27 parallel plenaries, 4 keynotes, and as of today, we have more than 60 abstracts received already. We expect another 30 to 60. So this is going to be a very full and rich program. So do visit our website to find out more about our programs. Submit your abstracts before the end of the month and register by 31st May. Thank you very much for being with us today. Get in touch with us. We hope to hear from you if you have any questions at all.
Thank you so much, Tim and Juliana, and everybody joining us today.
Yes, and thank you, sweetie Jane. Yes. And anyone would like to say anything before we go? We have 3 minutes. Lars, would you like to have the last say?
Well, I thank you very much, Tim. It has been really interesting, and I think these webinars are so good for kind of preparation for the conference next year in Singapore. And I just think that the discussion about naming experts by experience, service users, or we use citizen, because in Denmark, where I come from, citizen is including everybody, also people without a citizenship. So it might differ from country to country or region to region. So I think that's an ongoing and very interesting discussion. We also have a Danish word there where we turn experts by experience a little different way. So it's just showing that it needs to be connected very much to the local language and local understandings. And especially it should be accepted by the experts by experience. So I just think that it's, I know it's only one part of this presentation today, but it's really interesting and good to know.
Yeah. And if I may add to what Lars is saying, in fact, I'm very impressed by what the UK colleagues are doing. In fact, they are not just involved in research. The expert by experience are also involved in policy making for service that are delivered in hospitals as well as in the community. And in our coming conference in July, we will also be inviting expert by experience to deliver a keynote speech to acknowledge their contribution to research, to practice, and that's what we are learning also from the UK, where they really give a proper place, not just a proper name, to our practice, our experts by experience. With this, let us close today. I think it has been a wonderful time, a very short 90 minutes. Sweeting and her team will continue to elaborate on some of these ideas when we meet in Singapore through the parallel plenaries as well as through other presentations. We look forward to you joining us in Singapore. Keep in touch with us. Good day, good night. See you again.